Welcome to the Soul Path Sessions podcast with Deborah Mines-Pearson and Brenda Littleton. Brenda is an educator and counselor rooted in Jungian and eco-psychology. She helps her clients understand the importance of the mind, body, spirit, and earth relationship for healing. Deborah is a licensed psychotherapist and has been trained in traditional and sacred psychology, exploring from the ground up what makes our human experience meaningful, wholesome, and enlightening. Deborah and Brenda invite you to accompany them on a soul path journey as they explore the possibilities of living a more soulful life as therapists, seekers, and lovers of fate.
And welcome back. And we are continuing our discussion of initiation invitations, and we're looking at Epiphanies. And this is kind of a continuance from our prior podcasts when we were sharing stories of initiations and our choices. And we started talking off mic about some of the things we didn't talk about. So we're going to return and come back. And Deborah, you had some comments about the death and invocations, the Epiphanies, and since we are in the holy time right now, it seems to be fitting to integrate this into our time and space today.
Exactly. You'd asked me in the last episode, when I said when I was 17 and I had this experience of turning into light and exploding, how I'd integrated it. And I just said, because I knew it was there. But I told you that the one that really stayed with me was death initiated me. And when I was 21, my father took his own life. And largely because my father suffered from a mental illness that wasn't treated in those days. And his despair grew. And I had this huge wedding. I kind of felt forced into the arms of a person that I wasn't ready to marry. And he didn't really want to marry me, but I needed a family that was more stable. And that's how I went about it. And I left on my honeymoon, and I couldn't reach home. I was supposed to meet my dad, and we were going to meet at the top of the Mark and have a drink in San Francisco because he was traveling, and he didn't show up, and we didn't have cell phones. So I called home, and they changed the number, and my brother and my sister-in-law answered the phone, and it was her phone number. I'd actually changed my parents' number to my brother's number, and they said, "Oh my God, it's Debbie." And it was like 3 days after. And my brother said, "Are you sitting down?" And I hate it when anybody says to me, "Are you sitting down?" Don't tell me that. I'll faint. I'd rather faint than. And he says, "Dad took his own life." And I was literally screaming, didn't he take Mom too? I was really frightened of that. And so I found out what he had done. He'd taken his army rifle and he had killed himself with it in my bathroom. And I walked, after I hung up, in a complete state of shock. I was staying in this little place in San Francisco on my way up to the Oregon coast. And I walked into the bathroom to put cold water on my face, and I was in shock, and I saw the face of a person that wasn't my face anymore. I didn't recognize her. And suddenly I was lifted out of my body, and it felt like I just picked up. And there were these, I would call them dark angels. But they were definitely heavenly voices, and they pulled me up so I could see myself in two places, one above myself. And this voice said, "Now it can begin." These voices said, "Now it can begin." And when they said, "Now it can begin," I went into what I'd call a rapture. And it was something my soul experienced. I exulted. And I was like, my soul was like doing this happy dance. Like, yes, that's why we came here. I had this moment. And then I had a soul contract, and it could only start if something epic happened, I guess. I'd like to put it in terms that you all understand, but this is what I experienced. Then I came back into my body, and I was just devastated. I was numb. In fact, later that night when we finally got home, I actually ran my body into the shower to try to stop myself. My body couldn't handle that much grief. I would run across the room and hit the shower wall. And my husband, who was my husband of 10 minutes, because no marriage could last through that kind of grief.
The 10-minute husband.
The 10-minute husband, I call him. Yeah. So I ended up, I was bruising myself, and he wanted to go to work the next day. We were not meant to be together. So I just slept on the couch, but I did the whole grief journey. So, and 3 months after that, my grandfather, who I adored, and he said, "I will be your dad now." And that was so precious. And there's wedding gifts all over the house. It was just horrible to come home to this. And my grandfather, who I adored, said, "I will be your dad now." And I remember at my dad's funeral, he held my hand, and the same people that had been at my wedding were at my dad's funeral. And it was just unreal. Mm-hmm. And he was in his navy blue suit, and he looked so handsome. And I thought, I can do this. My grandpa's here. So 3 months later, on Thanksgiving, my grandfather came to dinner. I played tennis with my brother. And Mom and I cooked a feast in her new home. She was very tender. And my grandparents were going to spend the night. And after dinner, my grandfather and I sang, "Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream." We used to sing together, I adored him. And he told me, I had a funny dream. I dreamed that there was this oil tanker and it had a leak in it. And I said, "Oh, isn't that interesting? I don't know what that means." I'm like 21. I don't know what that means. I go home. I get a phone call. And it's, again, one of those, "Will you sit down?" And it's my mother. She goes, "Grandpa died. He had a heart attack. And he died in the bed right after I left." And I went racing down to the hospital in my pajamas. I didn't even take myself out of my pajamas. And my whole family was there in their pajamas. And there was Grandpa. They wouldn't let us see him. But they had tried to resuscitate him. And my mother had watched that. She'd watched, they put needles, in you. And they try to put adrenaline in your heart. She'd watched all that in the first night in her new home. That's her initiation. So this was a strong initiation. Mm-hmm. And I would have to tell you that'd be the night that so many things died. My grandmother left her body. Emotionally, she never came back. We all slept in the same bed. And I was so in despair. I had just moved back to California. I really had no friends I'd moved away to Texas, and now we're back. California is so, I remember saying to God, these impassioned cries. I mean, we sold all the furniture in the front yard of my mom's house in Huntington Harbor. Every stick of it gone. And put Grandma in this. Grandma wasn't doing well. Grandma moved in. It was just a crazy time. And I'm married to this person. I don't even know who he is. And I remember saying, I don't want to be here. And I have to be here for my mother. I have to keep her alive. I have to keep Grandma alive. I'm going to do these things, but I don't want to. But you have to show me you are real. I remember being on the freeway and thinking, I'm just going to let go. I'm 55. I'm just going to let go. Jesus, take the wheel kind of moment. I don't want to be here. You better show me. Show me the money. And I completely I so surrendered and so lost. And I'd like to tell you this just went away. But I do recall that I went back to university. I was going to Cal State Long Beach at that time. I couldn't afford to go to University of Texas or any kind of school. The state was, not available. So I went back to school, and I remember sitting there, my little Mazda RX-3 car that hardly ran, looking out the windshield, and it was sunset, and it was in the middle of the semester. I'd just come back from my grandfather's funeral. And this light of the evening came to me, and this knowing that I was going to make this a good story. I knew it in the marrow of my bones, that I was determined, as God is my witness, that I was going to make this a good story. And I would not be stopped. It was like divine will and my will joined. I got straight A's that semester, which wasn't really the big piece of it, but the fact that I could even function in that way.
That you even went to school.
That I even could go to school. I had a lot of experiences I encountered a young woman on the campus who was crying, and I walked by her and I saw her crying, and normally I would have just kind of gone, oh, it's a little awkward, but I sat down next to her, and she told me she was gonna, if she just asked God if no one noticed her crying, she was gonna go home and kill herself. And then I got the first hint that I was being called to something.
Yeah. So your initiation through grief.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So grief, the sense of loss, the sense of despair, of not knowing and not having any skill set prior to be able to. I mean, yes, you went through your father, but it was so relatively new. There was no history. You were right raw in the moment, and the sense of the initiation through grief.
So initiate. Now, guys, I got a little footnote here. This is how weird synchronicity is. When I took my licensing exam, it was really crazy hard. 10 years later, I didn't even like psychology. That's another story for another day. But I got shifted into a master's in psychology. So here I am. They give me the test, the oral exam, the most difficult part. On the 10 years to the day of my father's suicide in LA, where my dad died.
That is simultaneously activating my memory of me taking my orals and walking in. And I don't want to dismiss where you left off.
No, not
but
at all.
I want to augment the sense of synchronicity.
Yeah.
I walked in, saw my name on the list and where I was to go, and feeling the sense of, I have no one to share this with. My parents had been dead for a while. My brother had died, and I had no real family. I had no one to really, after I take the exam, who am I going to share this with? And I felt completely on my own, like not just a lonely person, but I was in this world, this cosmos, completely alone. And on the list where it showed the time when my orals in the room, it showed the three people, I forget what they're called, but the examiners. Thank you, of course, yeah.
The examiners.
I know. And I looked, and there was a Barbara so-and-so, a Joe so-and-so, and a Michael so-and-so. And I immediately burst out laughing. My mother's name was Barbara, and my father's name was Michael. And so I had Barbara and Michael in the room with me. And I immediately knew I nailed it. Yeah. Before I even got in it. Yeah. And I just knew. It was just a real energy shift.
It's a total okay, now we're gonna play triple synchronicity.
Okay, good.
Because the night before my orals, I was a nervous wreck, and I went to bed feeling very alone, and not be able to sleep very well. And at 3 a.m, I woke up, as I wasn't sleeping, to use a restroom, which I was living in, and as I was in this small room, my father came to me. He was a dark, like, column of light. He was a presence, like I couldn't see him, but I could feel him. He was dark, but he was there, and he was standing right next to me, and he was supporting me. And the next morning when I walked down the hall on July 26th, his death day, to that room, I felt my father ushering me in. And when I did my oral examination, I went over the hour, because you have to talk, you have to answer questions, and I felt so full of knowing. I prepared for it. It didn't just happen miraculously that way, but I felt my father with me, supporting me. And when I went to leave, you were allowed to bring a few notes, and when they asked you a question, you could write it down. And the woman looked at me and she said, "You wanted to keep these for your scrapbook." Only a third of the people that came that day passed. I was one of them. And she gave me that piece of paper, and my dad came to me, so I wasn't alone either. Yeah. So see, how can you think this? How can you dismiss that?
I think it's there. The object is to be aware of it and to be able to see.
Oh, you got to say, when I took the written part of the examination, it was in the Pasadena Civic Auditorium where my parents met. So they went to their first dance there. So like everything was like, I took the test so fast. I was the first one out of the building. It was a very difficult exam. I was just like, my hand was like automatic writing. I left my sweater in there. They had to call me back. My husband was like, he was gone shopping. He was like, he didn't come for another hour. I'm like, did you think I did that right?
Yeah.
I was being supported. We have support.
We do have support. And the more, I guess this experiences, as I'm listening to your history and recalling mine, I'm always looking for the benefits and the lessons and what new ways can I be and how does it integrate. And often what I call the 3-day rule, and I found out you have the 3-day rule too, that, you know, after anything horrible happens at the 3rd day, there's some change, there's some lightening, there's some understanding, there's some healing, wholeness, moving forward.
3 days and 3 nights.
That's right.
What we're in right now.
Yeah.
Right? Good Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 3 days and 3 nights.
Yeah. That there is that break in normalcy, the break in the common, comfortable, day-to-day comfort existence, that perhaps having these episodic ruptures, these moments of initiation, are what we really need as humans. You know, we just, I know that I'm not one to, while I practice being present, it's these ruptures, these moments of the crack in the cosmic egg syndrome that allows me to see differently.
It's funny you should say that, because the day of my wedding, I was reading that book.
Yeah.
And I said to my dad, Joseph Chilton Pearce, you should really check him out. He talks about this being a relative reality and you can be in other consciousnesses. And my dad goes like, yeah. I was really pushing the book on him. And it's funny you should mention it.
Yeah, it's something that was one of my first initiatory books. It's a long time ago. I still have it. It's a yellowed paperback. You know, it's if I breathe on it, it falls apart. You know, it needs to be in a plastic bag. So, what counsel, other than example, but the sense of sharing our stories in hopes of serving?
Oh, totally. People come to therapists, counselors, healers because they're broken. You don't get somebody's telling, I just feel like paying you to tell you how great I feel. That's not why they call us. They're calling because they're at thresholds. They are in this holy ground. And if we don't see it as holy ground, I mean, this is an initiation you're going through. I mean, I don't wish it on you. I don't want for you to suffer. But when the striding self sits down and doesn't know what to do and is humbled, humiliated, soil, humus, hummus. When we are humiliated down to that place, there is always an invitation to go seeking more, to long for something greater understanding, to break from the normal world and be called into something else. But you can choose that, or you can just go below the radar and say, I'm wounded and I never want to get up. But the people who are brave enough to reach out, they're doing the soul call.
Mm-hmm. And it's also an act of permission, I think, to function and behave in ways that were conditioned through an ego conscious world, a compensation to not go there. But now there's a reason to go there. Now there's a way into a new form and out of an old way.
Yeah. And, a lot of times deep down, people may not formally pray, but their soul tells them something's done. Mm-hmm. Deeply, like this marriage is over, or I knew my son was going to die. I don't know. People tell me this all the time. Like they had some premonition. They didn't want to know it. Something was going to happen. Their soul it's like a low or deep sense of things. They weren't completely. Sometimes we're completely clueless. 9/11 clueless. In either case, it's an opportunity. You know, the Chinese symbol for crisis is the exact same symbol for opportunity. They're one and the same. I have it in my office. One of my clients painted it for me and gave it to me as a gift in a gold frame. It's, if you want it, it can be an opportunity.
It is.
To know more, to be more, to hold more, to be open to the meta, beyond our human understanding. And of course, with cell phones and instant communication that we take for granted, man, when I was a kid, somebody told me I had this little thing in my pocket that was a computer that I could talk to anybody in the world and find out anything. I say, are you kidding? It's like the Jetsons. You know, it's crazy. What? I mean, that would have been way beyond my imagination that we would communicate this way.
A Dick Tracy watch.
Yeah, and I think we're at least as interesting as our cell phones. I see our brain and our body as a receiver, storage unit, and transmission unit. I really do. Why should our phones be more interesting than us? So when we ask and we shall receive, we send out a vibration, we ask, and we have the ability to receive and to channel that information.
It reminds me of the work that I'm studying with Christy Marie Sheldon on clear and transmute across all time, space, dimension, and reality. Any obstruction, any resistance, and any form of blockage, and then you fill in the blank. And it's a sense of not this magical thinking per se, as it is understanding that there is a frequency available. And one of the exercises I was practicing, I actually went back in time. I was like 16, 17. And remember when you're young and anything is available to you, the world is your oyster, as the saying is, and that no matter where you went, no matter what you did, the opportunities were just showing up and popping up like popcorn. You know, it was just always there. And that was the way life was. And there was never any understanding that as you grew older and situations change, that those popcorn of opportunities would diminish or perhaps be more selective. And just going back into that frequency, back into that memory, was like stepping into a river, and just embodying that memory. And I have to tell you, there was within 24 hours situations that turned around, opportunities that produced phenomenal results, not only creatively but financially, with relationship-wise. And I thought, this is another one of those initiations. But instead of me relying on the crack in the cosmic egg, initiation, grief, it was, it can go the other way. It was that sense of walking into the room of joy, and it's always available. And that was it wasn't so much a learning as it was a memory of remembering, Brenda, it's there. It's always there. And what part of my ego conscious life has been so heavy and thick and occupied with other banal day-to-day, deeper, denser work that allowed me to forget that possibility and of my experience. And then also when you were discussing, being flooded with the light, and having that available. So I do, I see it both ways. I see it, the idea of our grief and truncated reality offers that opening. And we can also harvest the skill set, the sleight of hand, the sleight of heart, the opening, the turn.
Nice thought.
Yeah, the turn of it's us also available through joy. And
the path of joy.
Yeah.
Mother Mary says that there's two paths. One is sorrow, one is joy. They both lead you there. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think taking risks. Like I play music. When I play music, dude, I am the music. I don't have thoughts other than I'm digging this jam and this song, or I'm dancing. I mean, singing. It just takes me away. I'm in the moment. I go to joy. In fact, satsang and singing with people,
Yeah.
you know, joining in a group. If people go to concerts or singing, they don't have a problem in the world. Just sing it out.
The Baki Fest used to be so fantastic
Yeah.
in Joshua Tree. Just
Yeah.
the group energy of being at that same beat at the same time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I used to go see Amachi, and we would sing and praise God. And I get so high, I would have a voice that I wouldn't even know was mine. It could reach around the room. My heart was completely blown open. All of our hearts were completely blown open, because all we were there to do was acknowledge the oneness of God and love. How cool is that? And we, like you said, we get so, like, she was just simply underscoring what Christ and others have said, you know, lean on me, let me help you, I'll help you, this higher energy form, whatever you want to call it, and sing and praise and dance and move and, man, expand city, you know, expand Arama.
That is usually right under my fingertips when I'm working with someone that comes in and they're beginning their transition of finding their life in the latter part of, like, the last phase of their life. You know, they're from like 59, 64 area, and completely inappropriate to talk about joy and opening the heart chakra and moving into other choices. And it is still, you know, their beginning path. And I'm like recently, the last couple of years, especially through COVID, being aware of the discrepancy or the distance between someone's wanting a change in life versus the difficulty and the sadness and their sense of extrapolation away, you know, trying to leave. And yet it's really more of a molting. We talked about this in one of our earlier podcasts of the imaginal cells taking over, and they're molting and they don't know what's going on. And trying to work with someone it's not frivolous. It's not about dismissing what they're going through. And yet there is this huge energy in me saying, oh my gosh, I can't wait till you get through to the other side. You know.
Well, I think I can totally relate to the heaviness of it, because it is. I mean, you have all your traumas, and sometimes it's just too much, and something hits you and your joints hurt and your husband dies. Shit, that can get really heavy. Yeah. So I don't want to discount the dark night of the soul. In fact, I kind of like, you know, I have so much love and compassion. I worked at Gilda's Club for 6 years with people going through cancer and old age and losing loved ones. And it was just, it's really heavy. You have to go through it. And then let it be, you know, let it be there. And from that place, there has to be a season of grief. But I think, you know, I remember Harold and Maude, really, that movie, Harold and Maude. If you haven't seen it, it's really creaky. I get it. It was done in the 70s. But the whole, Ruth Gordon.
I cried.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And the Cat Stevens soundtrack. But she was a person in the film who was an older person, 79, I think, when the movie starts. But she essentially is living such an eccentric life. And that's always appealed to me, to be freer as you get older, to take that grief and say, why am I a member of a club that diminishes me? And could I be freer? Could I be free to take off? Like, one of the great thoughts I have that came to me is, like, when I was born, they called me a little stranger. Not, I am strange, but they say babies are little strangers.
Yeah.
So every time we lose somebody or something happens, we're introduced to life like a baby again. And if we lose our inner baby, that kind of curiosity, like, yeah, this really sucks, I don't know what I'm doing, but I wonder what's going to happen next. And the other piece is, you know, lifting your heart up to heaven. Like I talked about in that poem by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, you know, it's this prayer. Lift your heart up to heaven. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up. Yeah. Lift your heart up and say, I'm really ruined, but you wreck me, baby. You break me in two, but you move me, honey. Oh, yeah, you do. That's Tom Petty. Like, I'm going through the worst hell, but I'm doing a soul call. Like, God, if you can make this interesting and show me a way, my soul path. This is soul path. Show me my soul path through this time. I promise you, I will sing it on the mountain.
Yeah. And not fix it, not truncate it, not stop it. To
let it
completely
be.
bring it on.
Yeah, I think it's equal parts of, you lay down in the dirt, but at some point you lift your heart towards heaven, and it will be filled. And it will be filled. That's been my experience. When my mom went through this horrible experience of losing my dad, she said every day she'd ask herself, she wasn't young, she was she was 52 when this happened, but she said, you live or die. The question would be, do you live or die? And then she'd say, well, I'd lay there a long time, I go live.
Yeah.
And if you're going to live, you can live, laugh, and love. Remember the 3L thing? And she goes, I'm going to live just for today, one day at a time, 12 steps, one day at one breath at a time.
Yeah.
One moment at a time. You can't get out ahead of God when you're grieving. God sits with you when you're grieving. God is with you. God is in you, experiencing life as you, and also beyond you, coming to you. So God has all these properties. God is everything. God made you, so God is you. Having the experience of being you.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had a really important experience that taught me that. And I don't know where our time's at, but it'll either wait to this podcast or it'll be a cliffhanger. I don't know. But I really Keep going? Okay. So I was out in my kayak, Frida, on Duck Lake, where I go.
I'm looking at the photo.
Yeah. My favorite thing. And I had lost 2 friends, dear friends, my best friends, Rena Rodman and Kay Selzer. Had died again within 3 months of each other, like my dad and my grandpa. And this was just about, 6 years ago. These are like the inside circle people, the people you call when something happens and you want to tell them like you passed a test or somebody died or whatever. But they both died kind of unexpectedly and quickly. And so I went on my kayak and I decided to talk to Kay. So I sort of started, and Kay was like a light in the right-hand side of my vision while I'm on this kayak. And besides, I do a lot of, Gestalt work. So I was just talking to her anyway. I just start, and an eagle landed right beside me with its feet in the water. They come skidding in right when I called her.
Kay's here.
Kay's here, yeah. Kay's here. So we had a regular conversation. She was saying things like, oh, it's fine. She was really making very little of her experience, like, oh, it's such a relief. That's what she was saying. This is not permission for you to listeners out there to leave your Earth experience. You'll just be recycled. Have to come back here and do it again. But the point of the story is I got to this place. I talked to Kay. I'm sitting by the island looking across at my house. It's evening. The sky is perfectly reflected in all those glorious Pacific Northwest colors. Every color of the rainbow on a still lake, setting sun. And I'm feeling Kay, and all of a sudden this rumble comes from the shores towards me. It's a rumble like I've never heard. And this voice says, do you like how I'm doing Kay? And I say, yes. And then the voice says, do you like how I'm doing the lake? I'm like, yes. Do you like how I'm doing the sunset? Yes. And then up through the center of my body, with a radiance beyond any radiance, with a compassion beyond any compassion, the voice says, do you like how I'm doing you?
The ultimate love affair.
The ultimate love affair. And I'm holding this space and realizing I've never been alone, not one day of my life, because God is having the same headache, the same pimples, whatever I'm going, wrinkles that I have, and has gone through the same losses I have. Then, as I'm holding all that, this, from the edges of the earth coming towards me, rushing this lake, is this divine laughter. It's laughing like, isn't this the best joke you've ever heard? And I'm like, it is. It's laughing like this royalty, and laughing and laughing and laughing. And I'm just like, it's funny. And I also feel like my best friend is experiencing this with me. God is my best friend. I am God. I'm a part of God. And it's a funny joke. And so I look across at my house and I see the lights on and I go, I got to go in. And the minute I set foot on that grass, it will diminish. But for now,
you're in it.
I know the truth.
Yeah.
And the truth has set me free. And that was my big story. And I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, you're sticking to it. I love it. So the embodiment of spirit. Yeah, very much. Thank you for sharing your light.
Oh, thank you for sharing your light, Brenda.
That's beautiful.
And love and light to everyone.
God bless.
God bless.
And that concludes this week's episode of the Soul Path Sessions podcast with Deborah Mines Pearson and Brenda Littleton. If you'd like to hear more about living a more soulful life, please subscribe to our channel on your favorite podcast app, and be sure to check out the show notes and links below. For more information from Deborah, visit soulpathsessions.com. And for Brenda, brendalittleton.com. Thank you for listening, and remember to follow your soul. It knows the way.